Good afternoon and welcome to Design Master Training. My name is David Robison. Today we are going to be looking at options in Design Master Electrical for AutoCAD for light fixtures, receptacles, equipment, and switches. If you are attending the training live, you can ask questions in the chat box. If you're watching the recording of the training, you can call or email your questions. Our phone number is 866-516-9497. And our email address is support@designmaster.biz. Let's get started looking at the options. So in AutoCAD here, I'm going to go ahead and run the options command. For simplicity, I have my toolbar out and I've got the options for this project here. You can also get to this command on the ribbon under DME customization. It's the top left command. Options is there. On the pull-down menu, you can get to it under options, under customization, either project or standards. Project is for the specific project that you're working on. Standards is used for when you start a new project, what the settings are going to be. I'm going to run the options command. We have a lot. We're going to scroll down to this section here. We'll be looking at light fixtures, receptacles, equipment, and switches. The first option here is to insert the callout as part of each light fixture. That currently is set to no. So I set that option to no, and I go to insert a light fixture. And when I do that, it puts the light fixture on the drawing, no light fixture callout included. If I go to options and change that from no to yes, when I insert the light fixture, it will now have that callout included. So I run the command, insert the light fixture. And so it's including this the callout with the light fixture. If I move the light fixture, the callout moves with it. If I change the light fixture, that callout changes. If I go from A to a B, it updates that callout. So it includes the callout as a label on that fixture. You'll notice these other ones don't have the callout included. If you change this in the middle of a project, if you decide you want to have a different setting, if you run the coordinate command, it will update. I'm not going to do that because it'll take just a moment, but it would update with that callout on those. We have the light fixture callout block options. We have two callouts blocks, a long lamp label and a short lamp label, and then also the width of that lamp. So this callout is for when you are inserting a callout separately. So you typically you would have this set to no in this case. So you're not labeling each light fixture with a callout. Instead, you're inserting a single callout to designate a group of light fixtures. So if you have a bunch in a room, you just want to put one little label on there. So if I set that to no, because that's really what we're looking at here. So we have something like this. We've got a couple light fixtures, and we want to label all these with a callout. We can go to the light fixture section and run the insert light fixture callout command. We select the fixture, select a point on the drawing, and it's going to put in that block as the callout. The vast majority of people actually do their callouts as just the label of the light fixture and nothing else. So that's what our default is. We did have a customer that had a more involved light fixture callout, which is what all of these options are for. I can show you what that looks like. Basically, there's an option to include a little lamp information as well. So we're using the callout with no lamps. So we have built in the callout short lamp and callout long lamp blocks. And the block it chooses is going to be depending upon the width, because basically the lamp field can be wider than the callout. So this is where if the lamp label is wider than this, it'll switch to the other block. So now that we've chosen that different block, if I run the insert callout, we get a block that looks like this. So it has the callout and then the number of lamps, and I believe that's the lamp wattage there as well. So you could use this. You can also customize this block using standard AutoCAD commands to make a new block and then you can have your light fixture callouts look a little bit different if you want something else in there. Next option for light fixtures is also an option related to callouts. This is an option to insert the callout after each light fixture. If we set this to yes, what this will do is after you insert the fixture, it will then run this command for that fixture. So each fixture kind of becomes a two-step process. You insert the fixture, and then you insert the callout. You insert the fixture, you insert the callout. This is, as much as anything, for historical reasons. The customer really, I think, wanted something like this, but 20 years ago when we wrote this for them, because this is a very old option, there's a misunderstanding as to what exactly they wanted. So we implemented it like this, where they could insert it after each one. I think anyone who actually is doing it this way is just going to insert it as part of each fixture. But if you want to have the callout inserted separately, you could do that. So that's what the option is. I don't know that anyone actually uses it at this point, but it is there and available for you. The next option in light fixtures are blocks for lighting groups. Lighting groups we implemented originally to handle Title 24 calculations in California. And we tried for a while to keep up with that, and Title 24 just changes too fast for us to be able to keep up with all their changes. So we kind of stopped trying to do that. So it's not really used for that purpose anymore. It does still have a purpose if you are using ComCheck for your lighting calculations. So pretty much any state but California, Oregon, or Washington, everybody else uses ComCheck. We can export our information to ComCheck for our light fixtures. If you didn't know that, it's a feature. And ComCheck has some specific things for handling outdoor light fixtures that we have repurposed the lighting groups for. So you can use the lighting groups if you're using ComCheck, and if you are using a lighting group, you can have labels, and then the labels have a block, and this is where you would set that block, which is a very long explanation for what that option is. So if we actually group these light fixtures, so we have a number of commands for grouping light fixtures together. I'm going to go ahead and group these. I'm going to create a new group. And so then this block here, that is the block group that's being, the block that's being used for that group, to just label that, okay, these light fixtures are in that group, so that you have some documentation of that. If you're using the groups and you don't want to show it, typically the option, you can either, definitely can set it to a non-plotting layer. I'm going to check here. I think we could also turn those blocks off if you don't want them to show up. So if we set these to be nothing, and then I group a couple more light fixtures. Yeah, so if you don't want them showing up, you just set it to be blank. And the final block option for light fixtures is for the exempt lighting groups. So if you have a light fixture and you set it to be exempt, we will tag it. An exemption, again, goes back to our attempt to handle Title 24. I'm trying to think where else it ends up being used in the software. But if it is an exempt light fixture, this is how we tag it, saying that this is not going to be included in the lighting calcs. So if we go to a light fixture and we change it, the exempt from lighting calcs from no to yes, it'll put in that little block with the E there saying this is an exempt fixture. So again, you have documentation. So if you need a code reviewer to verify how you have things set up, this is how you can communicate that on your plans. The last option for light fixtures is for displaying the light fixture overlay. We have three options: never, during insertion, and always. I'll first just show you what the overlay is, and then we'll talk about the options. If I insert, so this is used for point-by-point photometrics. If you have a fixture that has an IES file associated with it, and it has an elevation, and you specified you're going to use it for lighting calculations, we will insert the overlay depending on that setting. So I have it set to insert during insertion. I click OK, and you'll see that we have the light fixture block, and then we also have those contour lines showing you the spread of light for that fixture. So I put the light fixture in, I rotate it, and then the overlay goes away. So if we go to options, we can see how that overlay is controlled. I'm going to turn off the light fixture callout after each block because I don't want to be bothered with that. So during insertion means that when you insert the light fixture, we'll show you that overlay so you kind of have a sense of where the light's going to go, but then it disappears after you've inserted the fixture. So it's not cluttering up your drawing. You can set it to never if you don't want it to show up during insertion, and then you'll just turn that feature off. You can also set it to always, which means that after the fixture is inserted, the overlay will still be there on a separate layer. I believe we have it set to non-plotting layer, but you can control that so you can display whether you want to show these or not. Because if you have the overlays, it actually gets pretty cluttered, which is why we default to having it during insertion and not always. So now if I insert a light fixture, again, we see the overlay and it stays on the plan. So I put another fixture in and you start overlapping these to get uniform lighting, and it starts to get pretty messy. So that's why we turn those off typically. But you can leave them on. And again, if you toggle that option, you can use the coordinate command to toggle that on or off within the drawing. The next options we have are related to receptacles. These options are the abbreviations we use for the different characteristics you could have for a receptacle. So we have little checkboxes for receptacles in the schedule for all of these things, and then we can label them on the drawing, and you can control how they're labeled. So there's explosion proof, weatherproof, GFCI, grounded, and isolated grounded. And then we have the abbreviations for all of those. So if you don't want to use these abbreviations, you can type in your own labels there. And these are used when we insert the light receptacles. So if I go to our receptacle schedule, all of those check boxes are here. So let's say we make an isolated ground receptacle. Check the IG. Actually, I'll check them all. This will be my everything receptacle. And we insert that receptacle on the drawing. It puts in a label for each of those characteristics. And it lets you label them, put them all somewhere. For all of them except the ground. If the checkbox is set for ground, we don't actually label the ground. It's assumed typically that you have a ground, and that shows up in the wire callout. The ground label shows up in the receptacle schedule is the place where that shows up. So if we insert the schedule on the drawing, it's already inserted, so it just updated. So if we update the schedule, we have the features, and then we list them all here. And so that's where the ground is labeled. So that's where you can control how that is showing up. And so then if you want to change any of those, you would do that through the options. So if you don't want to say GFCI, say if you just like to say GFI, we can change that in options. And instead of ground, you actually want to type that out in the schedule, you could do something like that. So I make those two changes. And if I insert a new receptacle, it will come in with the different label. Again, if you run the coordinate, it'll update that on existing receptacles on your project. And then if we update the schedule, it'll update these labels here. So it changed the labels that are displayed. So just in general, when you're changing options, if you change in the middle of a project, you typically have to run a coordinate or do something like that to get stuff that's already in there to update. So just be aware that that's something that you might need to do if you're changing these options midstream of a project. For equipment, we have a single option, which is the equipment callout. And so we have a couple different options. We can display the callout with the load and the horsepower, with the load either in kVA or amps, or just the load in amps. Then you can display just the callout. You can have no callout at all, or you can use a custom equipment block. I will show you all of them on the drawing. So I'll insert a piece of equipment. We will have a motor with a horsepower, and then we'll have a load on it. So you can see, because that controls, it ends up looking a little differently with those different types of loads. So here's the default. It's got the motor, horsepower, and then the load in kVA. And then you can change what that default is in options. You can also change it on the equipment itself. So each piece of equipment can have a different label. I'm going to go modify this piece of equipment directly just to show you the different labels. So we can run the modify. We can change it to amps instead of kVA. And so it'll do 4.2 amps instead of the 0.5 kVA. We could do just loads and amps. So it lists each load in amps, including the horsepowers. You can do the call out without any of that load information if you just want the equipment call out labeled. You can remove the call out entirely if you don't want to have it show your call out. Helpful for existing equipment. This is frequently used for. And then finally, we have the option for a custom block. We have a couple built into the software. One that displays the call out and one that displays an ID, which is just a sequential number. If I choose the call out and click OK, it puts it in there, apparently right on top of that other thing. So that block obviously assumes a slightly smaller equipment callout than what we're using. So if you want to have a block with a hexagon or something, you can make that block and then have it update here. So we could go modify this block. I'll do that. We can go to the equipment, the electrical customization. And I'm going to run the open block from drawing. So I'm going to go open up this block. And you have the block here. You have the callout attribute, which is going to fill in with the callout. And then we have these two connection points where we're going to connect the leaders. And I'm going to stretch this thing out. Save that. Close it. And then we need to update the definition in this drawing. So we run the redefine block in this drawing command, select that block, select the callout, and it'll redefine it with that block. It just redefines the block. It doesn't actually go in and update the arrows. A coordinate would fix that, or if we manually move that leader, it'll fix it also. Or move the block. So I can take this and move it, and it'll kind of refresh itself. So if you have equipment callouts that need to be different, you can control that in the options. For equipment callouts, you also can have that set per group. So your kitchen equipment could have a different callout from your mechanical equipment. And that is controlled in your equipment groups themselves. So you have the multiple groups, you have the settings, and then you have the callout, and then you can set it for that group. So if you want to, you can have a different callout for each group. Next is the switch options. So for switches, we have the option for the switch rotation, which is how we handle rotating the switch and the subscript to get everything to line up nicely. And there's a couple different options here. What we do with the subscript, if we rotate it to match the switch angle or not. And then what we do with the symbol in the schedule, when we insert it in the schedule, if we rotate it or not. And the reason for all of this is when you put a switch in, when you put it in, we have it set up so that the rotation angle is going to be perpendicular to the wall. And then you have the subscript and the group. So the subscript, we have the option to rotate to match to the switch or not. So that's one of the things that's being controlled. The group label is always at angle 0, like most of our other notes. But the subscript, you have the option to match to the rotation angle. So we can go back to our options and change that. So we could rotate it to 0, so it always reads up and down. And then we have the option to match the switch angle plus or minus 90 degrees, because if we want it to match the switch, some people have the rotation, have this be angle 0 on the switch. Some people have it so that it's 90 degrees. So basically you select the angle of the wall and then it rotates the switch for you. And when that happens, you need to rotate the subscript 90 degrees left or right to get it to match up nicely. So that's what that is there for. So if you use this as your insertion angle for your switches, you have to adjust how those callouts come in. But in our case, we might want to set it to rotate to 0. Put in a new switch, and you'll see that the 3 comes in up and down as opposed to rotated to match the block here. And then if you insert a switch schedule, we have the option for how these are going to be rotated. So we don't actually want them. If it was rotated just angle 0, you'd end up with switches that were kind of laying on their side, and it looks a little funny. So the option automatically rotates them to be vertical so that they read more nicely in the schedule. The next option is whether you want to allow upside down switch subscripts or not. So if I set this back to matching the subscripts to the switch angle, and if I drop in the switch, if the switch is upside down, so right now we're not rotating that, so the 3 is still readable. But if you wanted to, you could actually flip that upside down if you want your switches to display that way. So you can change this from no to yes. And now if I insert a switch with the same rotation, the 3 actually ends up upside down. So that's just controlling whether that can be flipped or not when you go over the 180 degrees. And the last option for switches is whether you want to provide a neutral wire to all switches in your project. This is, as you can see with the code reference, to support the NEC 2011 change. Basically, they want to have a neutral on all switches because you typically need a little power for handling like occupancy sensors and things like that. So you need the neutral, and so the NEC just said, we just want this on all switches from now on. This option is mainly for backward compatibility for old projects. So an old project, you can set this to no, and we won't include the switch. On new projects, this would typically be set to yes. And then when we draw our tick marks, you will get a neutral wire to your switch. So if we go take a look at this section here, let's circuit these up and we can take a look at what we do with the tick marks. And so currently there's no neutral going to it because that option is turned off. We can go into options and turn the option on. And we update the tick marks. We can either redraw the home run. We can also run the draw tick marks command, which will update what's there. And it includes the neutral wire to that switch. And that is all of the options for light fixtures, equipment, receptacles, and switches. Are there any questions related to those options? Any other options? Anything related to Design Master Electrical at all? Thank you for watching today's Design Master training. Contact us with questions or comments by calling 866-516-9497 or emailing support@designmaster.biz.